Hey everyone, welcome back to All Things Private Practice Podcast. Joined today by Denielle Rigoglioso, said the last name correctly, I think, a dedicated coach and mentor in the world of private practice, licensed professional counselor, certified substance abuse counselor, certified advanced alcohol and drug counselor, private practice owner, seasoned business strategist for clinicians, and a respected industry leader. And today we're going to kind of talk about some of your journey as like going into private practice, starting a coaching program, speaking engagements, and where the evolution of this career path can take you, as well as some money stuff, which is always quite polarizing for mental health people. You mentioned you were very nervous to be on here, and I always like to just name that in the beginning because it's like, let's just get all the nerves out now. And I know for me, when I'm doing speaking engagements and my heart is beating out of my chest and I name it, and then I'm kind of use some self-deprecating humor, typically I'm like, okay, now I feel fine. Oh, anything you want to share with the audience that I missed in your bio or just about who you are?
No, I'm just super excited to be here. You kind of captured everything just beautifully. I'm a private practice owner. I own a group private practice and I'm a business coach. So I own two businesses. So yeah, I'm just excited to be here and nervous.
Nervous,
Yeah.
yeah, like
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah.
So when did you get your master's? When did you graduate?
Ooh, 2015.
Okay, yeah, me too. So back in 2015, Danielle graduates. What's your like vision for this career? Do you ever think this is where you end up?
I never thought I would end up here. It's actually pretty mind blowing. And I really do sit in a gratitude space almost every day going, whoa, holy crap. I cannot believe that I'm here and this is the life of a therapist.
Yeah.
And that's really kind of still what propels me, even though it's propelling me, but I'm also using it to propel others because the narrative that we're always fed and me in 2015. So I'll go back a little bit if you want. I'll tell you a story. Um, so I graduated in 2003. I knew I wanted to be a therapist. I went to Virginia Tech, didn't get into their counseling program, ended up getting out of college, ended up getting married, not a good, healthy relationship, did not end well, was part of what happened there also propelled me into my niche in my private practice. But that's a whole nother story for a whole nother time. But I ended up a single parent, 100% single parent that time. And so I I started grad school, chose a graduate program that I have no idea whether it was like a credit or not a credit, but like all of these things. I started it. I ended up dropping out after about 4 weeks because I was commuting. I was working full time, commuting. I didn't have a kid at this time, so I'm going back a little bit more. So I stopped. And then once I did have my daughter, I realized that, I needed to go back to school. I needed to get my master's. And so, a lot going through a really difficult divorce, becoming a 100% single parent, I started my grad program. It was like crazy. And working full time. I had so many like really great supports in my life at that time. And so, graduating in 2015, I was like tired.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
just that makes me tired. So I imagine
Yeah.
so. And
Yeah.
call it like trauma response, call it resilience, call it ADHD, call it all three. But it sounds like you were determined to really see that through the second time around.
Absolutely. I've always been super driven. Um, and so I'm a hard worker and I'm very passionate about what I do. And so of course at that time I thought, yeah, I definitely want a private practice one day in the future. Right. And I just thought that it was just so out of reach. Like I had to save 50, 100K. And like at that point in time, yeah, you're paying for daycare, you're working full time, you are a resident, so you're earning hours. So, yep, a second job. Yeah, exactly. Sucks. It's like, and you're not making very much. And so it's like, well, how the hell am I gonna build a private practice? That man, I'm gonna be like really old by the time I save,
Yeah.
50K plus to do that. And so that mindset going in, and this ties into money mindset, right? Too. It's like we're just as clinicians, we're fed this narrative for so long. We work for free in our practicum. Then we work for practically free in our residency or internships and all of that. And then even as licensed clinicians, we're still not making enough, or you have to work so many hours
Yep.
to make ends meet and to save and to pay off your loans and to do all of the things that, and God forbid you have a kid in competitive sports, that will do you in right there.
Yes. Sure, for
So,
sure. I can relate to most of that minus the kid piece. And I think you're absolutely right. Like, yes, I think this profession, there's this narrative of you don't get into this field to make money. That's a constant, right? I think everybody can relate to that one.
yep.
I think you're even fed that line throughout grad school, like,
Mhm.
and it's almost encouraged that you don't make money. And there's almost that
Right.
shame, right? Of like, if
Yes.
you do want to go into business ownership, you're just greedy or you're like really taking advantage of people or it's really feeding into capitalism, which to some degree it is, but we live in a fucking capitalist society. So that's our reality. And it's almost like you are supposed to give yourself away, right? Like that's the feeling.
Right.
That's what we anchor into. And then people feel
Right.
really guilty for wanting something different.
Yep. Yeah. And so that just continues to compel us into this space where we get really burnt out. And then even if we try to leverage ourselves in a private practice, um, we end up, seeing everybody and thinking we have to take everything. And then we're joining this group or that group, or we're signing on with this platform that pays you $30 an hour. Like McDonald's managers make $30 an hour. Come on now. We have thousands of hours underneath of us and master's degrees, and some of us PhDs, right? PsyDs. Like that's mind blowing.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
yeah. Um, so yeah, I knew it was a dream. I just didn't think it was possible, and I worked really hard. I did a lot of practice building for other people, moving up into supervisor positions. I ended up getting an opportunity where I could build a community-based mental health practice from the ground up. And that was in Virginia Beach. And then I ended up building a second site for that company. Outpatient ABA, crisis services, intensive in-home, mental health skill building, all of these different variety of services. And here I am building a multi-million-dollar practice for someone else. And the light bulb just clicked that I could do this myself,
Yeah.
But it was like, how do I do that? Because here's what's also attached. And not everybody's in like a toxic environment, right? Some people love where they work. It's
Totally.
just, it's not flexible, or there's not enough freedom, or it really isn't enough pay, but they love their family and their coworkers. And I loved my team, loved them, still do, still love them. But it really became a very toxic work environment, and I was super burnout. Like I tell everybody, like I was mentally falling apart, but I was also physically falling apart. I cracked a tooth from stress. Like that's insane. That was my wake up call. Like you can't keep doing this. Something has to change. And so I had built my private practice in the background while I was doing all of that, running those two sites. And then I finally said, that's it. I can't do this anymore. I said to my husband, he was like, and because I kept saying, oh, 6 more months. Oh, 1 more year. Oh, you know. And then finally I got to a point where I was like, I have to do it. He's like, what? And I'm like, I have to put in my resignation. He's like, now? Like, yeah, right now. Like right now.
Going through your mind when you're thinking resignation from security and consistency and stability, quote unquote?
Here's the reality. There's risk in everything that we do. There was risk in staying there. And if I had stayed there, I don't know what would have happened. I mean, it was wearing on me. It was wearing on my family. I say this all the time, but like, I remember talking to my boss saying, I have 10 minutes to take my daughter from home to cheerleading practice. I'm like, that's like the only time I get, because I'm always on call and whatever. And I'm like, if you guys could just not call me
Yeah.
during that time. I'm high anxiety. So like, I want to answer the phone. So if my boss calls, I want to answer the phone because I do not like any discord. So Like, that's the only time I get that should have been a huge wake up call for me of like right then and there when I said that. That's not okay. I need to have time and freedom and flexibility. And so, I moved into private practice from burnout. And so like what I try to teach other clinicians is that you don't have to do that.
Right.
You don't have to wait till you get to that space. You can be happy where you're at, but still take care of you by opening your private practice and moving fully into that.
Yeah.
So do it before you lose a tooth.
Yeah. That's a good line for this episode for sure. I
Yeah.
think a lot of people who are listening probably resonate with that. And I know myself, talking about my own journey, similar in a lot of ways. And I think a lot of people's who work in any sort of community mental health setting or helping setting in general get to that point where it's like, I am so burnt out. I don't know what else to do. I really have this dream of starting my own business, controlling my hours, granting my own PTO requests, like having that freedom and autonomy, right? Like that's always what, when I used to do private practice coaching, I always ask like, what are your big reasons for why you want to do this? And it's always the
Mhm.
same answers like freedom, autonomy, the ability to have my own control over my situation. But like you said, there is risk involved. And
Mhm.
for most of us, I would imagine, I would guesstimate like 95 to 98% of us, we probably had no business training, right? So, like
Right.
in grad school, it's almost taboo to talk about owning a business. Then you're in community mental health. And it's like, no, that's just like a fantasy. You don't really get to do that. And if you do have to reach this elite level of burnout where you've earned it. And it's like,
Mm.
you really don't have to go through this like gatekeeper esque pull yourself up by your bootstrap mentality of a lot of
Right.
clinicians in our profession where it's like, once you reach this excelled level of burnout, then you can think about opening a business. And that
Right.
really does not have to be a reality for people. Uh, if you want to go the community mental health route to get a diversified experience, and I'm not going to like shame people for their decisions, but well, ultimately, what I don't want you to do if you're listening is like prevent yourself from pursuing your goals because you're fearful of the outcome. And
Right.
entrepreneurs, if you open up a business, I hear a lot of you saying, I'm not an entrepreneur, but if you open up a small business, there is some entrepreneurial mindset there. There's some
Mhm.
desire to control the narrative. I really want to encourage you to take that risk and to step into that discomfort because ultimately, a lot of burnout could be prevented. A lot of mental health struggle, a lot of anguish, a lot of like physical discomfort. And a lot of us don't
Yeah.
want to let people down, right? Like we're people pleasers a lot of the time. So leaving your staff, your employees, your teammates, your clients, it's like, oh my God, I'm letting everybody down, but I'm putting myself second all the time.
Right. Right. That's huge, right? Us putting our it's like we put our passion above ourselves and that floats along with that narrative, right? Of like you're not allowed to make money. Like you can't make six figures as a therapist because there's shame attached to it. And, you know, that means that you're not passionate, right? And you're not serving people for free and you're not taking Medicaid and you're not like
Right.
that's not fair. We can't let passion drive us. We have to take care of ourselves. And I can tell you just personally how much more of an impact I have on my clients when my mental clarity is free and I have the space to disconnect, and having those 4-day weekends where I'm not seeing clients.
Right.
It gives me time to research. It gives me time to myself to take care of me. I'm excited to step in to see my first client of the day. That is
Absolutely.
game changer. Like talk about your passion really thriving. Your clients thrive from that too. Healthy therapist, healthier client.
Oh, for sure. There's a ripple
Yeah.
effect in that too, like,
Yeah.
and I think we get caught up in that mentality of this career path only has to look one certain way, or there's only like, it's either community mental health or private practice. But in reality, our skill sets as therapists, as helping professionals, as people with advanced degrees are really applicable in so many arenas. So, like, I know
Yes.
you do speaking engagements. I know you have a group
Mhm.
practice. I know you have a coaching program. So, like,
Mhm.
there are lots of ways that your skill set can have a much wider impact on the
Yes.
community at large.
Absolutely. So it's so cool to watch. And I have a couple clinicians who've been through my program too, who have I just love watching them build different intensives and expand and go to speaking events and build retreats. And it's so fun to watch. You don't have to expand beyond private practice,
No.
but it opens up a world of possibilities. I never thought I would be coaching therapists in to build their private practice. It just sort of came naturally. Like once I started my private practice, then I expanded to a group practice, and then I just was so passionate. I found another passion, right? And excitement for like we can change every therapist's life, by teaching them how to do this. And then the possibilities once you do it are just so incredibly endless. I mean, since then I've opened my coaching business. I've had really cool speaking events, and continue to have those opportunities, which I find really fun, especially because I do all of this from literally right here. So
Yep.
getting to do those things brings in community, um, and man, it's so nice to talk to like real life people that you can touch. Um, and so, if you want to do more, right? Intensives are massive right now. Those are really cool things to do, and expanding your practice if you want to. And even if you don't, like that's okay too. Even if you just want to see 15 clients a week, have your 4-day weekends, float in the pool on Mondays while your partner's at work. Do it. Do it,
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just very like always looking for the next thing. That's just sort of who I am. I can't sit still. Maybe that's because I am neurodivergent and
Maybe
ADHD.
so.
Uh,
Maybe so.
maybe. And it's so funny because maybe about 4 weeks in to just my solo private practice and leaving that full time salaried job behind, I was like, oh, wow, that's extra time. What am I supposed to do? And I kept having to like, no,
Yep.
no, no. And I was like, oh, I could be a travel agent. Oh, no, stop it.
Super relatable. I used to look at
Yeah.
those blank spaces in my schedule, and I was always like, "What am I supposed to do with all this time?" Like, because,
Mhm.
in reality, my story mirrors yours in a lot of ways, and I think a lot of people listening probably resonate. I was always, like, in middle management. I was always finding
Mhm.
myself promoted, and I was always getting my work done in half the time, but having to be in a location triple the time, and it never made
Right.
sense to me. It was just like, if I can get my work done in 15 hours or 20 hours, why do I have to be here for 50? And
Mm.
what like the on-call piece, I will never, ever miss that. But
Nope.
the reality of, like, moving into your own, situation, especially for those of you listening who are more entrepreneurial, who want to do more than just one-on-one practice, who are likely ADHDers because you're like, my creativity is now, like, buzzing because I have so much free
Yeah.
time. To be able to understand all of the different revenue streams, all of the different ways that you can make money in this profession and still help people. Like, for me, sitting here with you, this is my 3rd year of this podcast, right? So, like, you'll eventually be like episode 175. And I never thought that was a thing. I didn't know anything about podcasting. I didn't know I could monetize a podcast. I didn't know that I would become a keynote and a TEDx speaker back in grad school. I didn't know I would host my 25th retreat this year. Like, I didn't know any of these things existed. And until you
Mhm.
start showing up in different spaces and surrounding yourself with different people, you kind of get a glimpse of like, oh, there's so much possibility in this career path, and it does not have to look one certain way. Because for
Right.
me, and I think a lot of people who are probably neurodivergent mental health professionals, you probably get uncomfortable by the idea of like, I have to commit to something for the next 20 or 30 years of my life. Like, I don't even know what I want to do next year, if I'm being quite honest.
I hope you know what you want to do next year because you've got a lot of things planned.
2025 is spoken for, but then people will ask me, like, what do you have in store for 2026? I'm like, living my life that way just feels uncomfortable because then I have
Yeah.
to commit certain parts of me to like different parts of my schedule. But it's really nice though too. It's a double edged sword because it also says like I have the freedom to really get creative about what I want my career to look like and what I want that trajectory to look like. And
Hmm.
until you start like taking risks and stepping out of your comfort zone, it's really hard to imagine that there is another possibility, right? Like I always talk
Right.
about timelines, and I think timelines are important, and doing that, like zoom out uh, in your business, in your career path, and your life. And I can think about like 2015 getting my master's. Okay, my timeline says community mental health, stay there for
Hmm.
30 years. Boom. Maybe you'll get loan repayment. I don't know. Probably not. Then it was like private practice in 2017. That's the finish line. Then it was like coaching program, Facebook group, podcast, retreats, group practice, speaking engagements, write a book. I don't know where the next 5 years takes me. And I think that's the beauty is like the more risk we take, the more we
Yeah.
are easily able to navigate that without as much fear, without as much
Hmm.
imposter syndrome and self doubt to hold us back. Like it still exists. But every
Yeah.
time you take one more step or one more risk, it allows you to kind of like layer it and build on it so that the next one doesn't take as much mental energy and takes up as much space. And I really think
Right.
the more we step out of our comfort zones, the more likely it is that we are going to create career path. Almost dropped my fidget. Um, Career paths that really feel really energizing, passion filled, and fulfilling.
Yeah, I completely agree. But I think that's the hardest part, right? Is that imposter syndrome. So recently talking to a couple of newly licensed therapists, right, who are like, I really want to start my private practice, but I'm a new therapist. I just got licensed. I feel like I should work for a group practice first.
Yep.
And I'm like, well, wait a minute. That doesn't make sense to me because are you going to, in your private practice, right? Are you going to provide different therapy to that client than you would in the group private practice? And they're
Right.
like, no. I'm like, well, so then just the difference is that one of them you're getting paid more and it's your own, and the other one you're not. And they're like, oh, yes, you're doing the same service. Do you still need support? Do you still need supervision? Utilize your network. There's
Yeah.
so much out there. And even if I see a lot of therapists that just don't have a network. There's so many opportunities to connect in your community if you
So,
just look for them. And if there
oh,
isn't one,
start one.
make one. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because you might live in an area, right? If you're listening and you're like, there is no like social media support or therapist group, right?
Hmm.
Here in Nashville, I mean, I'm very lucky. The one is pretty large, it's pretty active, and blah, 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 blah. But if I lived more in rural North Carolina and didn't have one, there are other people looking for those connection opportunities. So if there isn't one and you feel like you have the energy and capacity to start one, not only do you set yourself up as the face of it, but you also build that know, like, and trust factor. You build that community. You really get to anchor into that. And I think for those of you listening, even if there is a group in your area, if it's not that active or it just doesn't like feel values aligned or it doesn't feel like it really feels like your people, start one.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And then you can expand from there, right? It's just like, hey, let's do coffee on a Saturday. Here's the meetup, here's the time. Love to connect with other people. And that's a great way to build your private practice too, is that
Totally.
networking piece.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, just, I imposter syndrome creeps in, and I think that we have to challenge that. And we also notice that like when imposter syndrome is present, it might mean that we're doing something big and that we're making a change. And that's okay. Like,
Absolutely.
embrace it.
For
You think
sure.
was not scared to leap into, I mean, I have a family and expenses and payments, car payments, I had student loan payments, all these things to leap into private practice. Absolutely was I I was so scared. And so I get it. And you're not alone. Everybody experiences that. There's common humanity in that. And
Yeah.
so I teach a lot about self-compassion. And that is such a huge piece of everything that you do moving forward. So tied back in just to bring back what we talked about, money mindset, right? There shouldn't be shame behind taking care of yourself and your family and your financial needs. You're allowed to do that. That's part of that self compassion, flipping that script of passion in the driver's seat. Let's put passion in the passenger seat and you in the driver's seat.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Come along for the ride.
Yeah, and I think, imposter syndrome, self-doubt, perfectionism, whatever we want to call it, is normal. It's a part of humanity. Like you said, if you're not experiencing it, I'd be a little weirded out by that. I like to think that if after all of this stuff over the last 5 or 6 years, if I start getting nervous or I start doubting myself, I really know that I'm on the right track. I know to use doubt and fear and imposter syndrome more like a compass and a guide, opposed to something that is going to derail me and prevent me. And that's really why I've tried to embrace that, like, doubt yourself, do it anyway motto, because honestly, I think that's where the most lived human experience is when we really start to embrace that and we really start to step into that. So really appreciate you coming on. On a scale of 1 to 10 with your anxiety with how it was before, how are you feeling now?
So much better. I'll give you 8.5.
All right, I'll take it. And I think that, again, just sharing some of your own story and your journey. And I hope that those of you listening really relate, because I think what you're saying, Danielle, is very relatable. I've said it before in a different viewpoint on here many times. And a lot of us are experiencing this kind of emotional roller coaster journey of entrepreneurship. So if you are, I hope this was helpful. Danielle, I know I'm going to see you multiple times in January, both in Belize and in my retreat building event. So excited for that now that we've actually met and connected. Tell the audience where they can find what you're doing and what you've got to offer. And we'll also make sure that all of Danielle's information is in the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have so much, so bear with me for a second. So you can follow me on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, pretty much any social media platform, and we'll drop those links for you. But I also have a Facebook group. It's called Therapist Freedompreneurs. There's over 30 free private practice trainings. I do 1 to 2 live free trainings every month. Just did one yesterday. They're all in there for replays. You can watch at any time. Lots of pro tips and free guides in that Facebook group. So you're more than welcome to join that. I also have, obviously a website, Saltwater Counseling. Here's something, you should never name your 2 businesses the same thing. So, Saltwater Counseling and Wellness is my private practice. Saltwater Coaching and Consulting is my coaching business. And so you can find lots of information in there, free 5-step guide for you. If you're ready to take some steps into launching your private practice. I'm always available via Facebook Messenger, email, if you have questions. Well, Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. And I'll see you in like 2 months in our all neurodivergent retreat resort in Belize. So I'm really excited for that too. For everyone listening to All Things Private Practice, new episodes are out every single Saturday on all major platforms and YouTube. You can like, download, subscribe, and share. But you can also check out my online 2-day intensive retreat building event at the end of January. I'm also co-hosting an event for group practice owners with 𝐶𝐸𝐿𝐵𝐺𝐸𝐿𝐵𝐺𝐸𝐿𝐵𝐺𝐸𝐿𝐵 and Warburg in January. And you can also come to Scotland in July for the Doubt Yourself, Do It Anyway Summit. So make sure to check out those opportunities on my website, allthingspractice.com. Doubt yourself, do it anyway. See you next week.